when you talk about the swamp, are you really serious? The last guy, Trump, do you know who ran the Department of Commerce? Do you know who ran the EPA? Do you know who ran the Interior Department? All of those that I just mentioned were run by some of the biggest lobbyists in the history of Washington. 3 of them that I can think of had to resign because they were so corrupt. You're telling me that this is the swamp? This is nowhere near the swamp. Your guy, your Jesus, Donald Trump, he put lobbyists who sued those administrations, regulatory agencies that are designed to keep poisons out of the air, water, soil. He put lobbyists, coal lobbyists, in charge of EPA, Interior. It's absurd. Wilbur Ross ran the Department of Commerce. Look at Wilbur Ross. He didn't even divest himself of investments before he took over the Department of Commerce. So don't tell me, Andrew, about the swamp, brother, because your boy he put the S in swamp. It was laughable. So sorry, man, but I want whatever you're smoking, because you are in a dreamland, brother. Now, David may or may not be right about, Trump getting in. I think there's a very good chance that Trump will get in. And I've articulated some of the reasons, and I even took you through that piece that I asked David to comment on. But there is no swamp like a Trump swamp. The military will never go along with Trump trying to institute a dictatorship. Just the opposite is true, Randy. Just the opposite is true. This time, Trump would get rid of the Mark Milley's of the world, and General Flynn would be there handling all of the new hires at the Pentagon. And the military, if you look at the military in general, rank and file, they actually lean which way, Randy? They lean right. So, again, if you're evaluating the likelihood of the military going along, and again, when you say a dictatorship and I say a dictatorship, we talk about 2 different things potentially. I think there's this conception that it's the troops walking along the street, dictatorship like communist China. That's not what this sort of dictatorship is. It's a creeping dictatorship that robs you of rights, that robs the government of power to protect you, that creates essentially a system by which you can be imprisoned, fined, and otherwise have your property taken by the government. That all seems so fantastic. Like, what are you talking about, Mark? In the United States of America? Yes, it can happen. These other places in Europe, all the way over there in Europe where nobody pays attention, what do you think they were like before those dictatorships took over? And by the way, they still have elections. You think Hitler just didn't take over? There was an election. This idea that, there's an election in our country, we have an election. There are elections in all of these countries. In Central America, in South America, in Europe, in Hungary. There are elections, and there are also autocrats in charge. So just to make the point, I feel as though there's a disconnect. We've gotten fat and happy in this country. We have to protect those rights that we have, and I think we have to claw back a lot of those rights that we have lost.
I want to support Randy a little bit because, and maybe this is Pollyanna.
Yeah.
But when you become a member of the military, you have to take the oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And so that's your oath. And I understand that, a dictator or a Trump would align himself with supporters and this time would be smarter about having people in power that were, had his back. But I can't think that every member of the military, people who sign up to serve the country and take that oath to defend the Constitution, would go along when they see it's being shattered.
Wow, that's one of the most naive things I've heard in months.
Okay.
I
And I
have
thought
to-
you were going to say that to me. Yeah.
And I have to say, I mean, I'm sorry, but I really want to slap that down because there's a lot of that. Oh, they would never do that. And come on, they're police officers. They swear an oath. They're military officers. They swear an oath. Brett Burkhardt and I used to get into this constantly. Brett would constantly, well, they took an oath. Brett was convinced that the beginning of the impeachment hearings, they would all actually, because he was so impressed by the solemnity of the moment, you know, how they all signed their names and they walked down, all that crap. It's crap. The oath is crap. Who took an oath? Trump took an oath. Remember, maybe you saw it on TV. All of these guys took oaths. The guys who ran all those departments, they took oaths. Everybody takes an oath in Washington. Menendez took an oath. The senator who took all the gold bars and cash. The oaths mean nothing. It's the intent. And what I would say is, if you look at, there were 230 military leaders who signed retired military leaders, to be fair, who signed a letter supporting Trump. That was in 2020. And if you look at the ranks of the military, there are even within the ranks of the military, essentially built-in rebellious groups. I mean, there are those who, as you're aware, the military is a true cross-section of America. And the military also likes order. Many of those who are involved in the military favor order, as do I, by the way. And I would just make this last point. I don't mean to be too harsh about this, but I really feel like we all need a cold slap in the face. I mean, the idea somehow like somebody else is going to take care of the democracy. We talked about this with Anthony Davis. It's just not true. We all have responsibilities as Americans. And I think one of the things we get drunk on is, oh yeah, those guys in the uniforms, they'll take care of us. They would never go for that. Well, I mean, the reality is, I'm sorry, oath or not, they will, many of them, be okay with trying to enforce order. And I have to say, a lot of the populace is okay, even if you look at some of the dictatorships that exist in other countries. In fact, I remember speaking to people in Iran who used to talk about, well, the Shah keeps order. You could even talk about to people in Iraq who said, well, it was brutal. It was a brutal regime. I'm not saying that there weren't human rights abuses, but he kept order. People like order. And when you have a sense of lawlessness and society coming apart at the seams, that allows those like Trump and those who also seek that authoritarian rule, that allows them to rise to power. And now to the military. And the military likes to enforce order. And now, the military isn't turned loose on the streets of America typically, but you've seen it in the way law enforcement takes to the streets. And believe me, I like it too. Do you think when I see these protesters taking on law enforcement, I go, what's going on here? This is just not cool. These guys have to be, an ordered, peaceful protest is one thing, but the idea somehow that you can just create mayhem, no, not cool. So I think you have to protect these rights, and you have to create order in a society that also allows citizens to have rights. And due process is a right. And I think the idea that we could give up a lot of these rights without it being something that happens with a thunderclap and a new national anthem is something that we all have to get our heads around. We had a huge slap in the face in 2016 when Trump won and all our jaws dropped and 150 million U.S. citizens turned on their TVs and said, what the F? Yeah, and I mean, but look at the effects of Trump's reign or Trump's tenure. I mean, the effects were dramatic. And I guess all I'm saying is, without any guardrails, this time he'll have all of these people. Michael Flynn, I just use as kind of the head of the parade, but he'll have Bannon back, and he'll have all of those who will essentially dismantle things like the Justice Department. Hey, my friend works at Justice. He said, this is during the Trump administration, he said, there's a guy here, he's not even a lawyer. He looks over everything to make sure that Trump doesn't have any interest. I think he had there was some kind of initial they had on it. There was some kind of so like if friend of White House or something, it was like or friend of Trump, something. So my point is simply, Kim, I don't, and then I'll shut up. But I mean, this idea somehow that, oaths protect you and those guys would never go with that because we know people who've served in the military honorably. And we think, well, that represents the entire military. No, it doesn't. And most of the guys take orders. I mean, honestly, that is a good soldier, somebody who takes orders. We're not looking for soldiers who are going to be thinking on their own. You got to pay attention to your superior. That's the way the military is. So if you can take control of the upper tier of the military, the rest follows.
Yeah.
These are scary times. I don't mean to be overly dramatic or over agitated, but I do think that we can. And all of those phrases, sleepwalk toward authoritarianism, sleepwalk toward the loss of the democracy, sleepwalk. There is a quality of sleepwalking because I think we have a reversion to the mean, which is, it's a normalcy bias. Things are going to be normal. Well, that was and then the other side saying that was not a big deal. We got through it. The democracy held up. I don't know why you guys make such a big deal of this. But,
well, because didn't we all see that it only held up, by the skin of our teeth?
Yeah.
Right? If it wasn't for just a very select few people, we would have been screwed.
Yeah. I mean, I think also that the doubt Trump's brilliance at your peril. Hitler looked like a joke too. Not so funny in retrospect, is he? That's exactly right. And it wasn't even a majority of Germans that supported Hitler. I mean, again, the Hitler thing. I know you think, oh, Mark, really? You're going to compare Trump to Hitler? Again, it's a creeping authoritarianism. Pick the authoritarian you want. But you just heard David K. Johnston lay out a pretty scary scenario, and he's much smarter than I am. And he's seen a lot and knows a lot more. I don't think it's that tricky to figure this out. Anyway, I'm just looking at the. So yeah, people can be convinced of a lot of things. And can Trump get rid of Social Security? Asked Tom Gunn. My favorite gun is the Tom gun, as you know. I don't think he can. He can't unilaterally get rid of Social Security, but he could cut back funding with congressional approval, and he'll get congressional approval on a lot of things once he takes over. One would think. I mean, once he really takes over, I'm talking about on funding for the Social Security Administration. By the way, that happens if the government closes down. Remember, we talked about this when the government still hasn't been funded past whatever date it is, February something. So government closes down, Social Security Administration will run with a skeleton crew to get people who already have Social Security their checks. But apart from that, the entire Social Security Administration just grinds to a halt. So anyway, enough about this, but that's my word on that. And I don't mean to be too harsh about it, but I mean, I think it's really serious. And I think we are absolutely delusional. And that's what I told Brett. And stop picking on Brett is what Doug is saying.
No, but you're right when you say we look at the people that we know that are in the military, the men in my family that have served, my husband, my father, take the oath that they took very seriously. And so when I think of people in the military, they're the first people that come to my mind, and that, they didn't, they still, that's at the top of their list as reasons why they joined, reasons why they served, and things they're proud of.
Sure.
So,
and you're right. I mean, it's like those who get stopped by a cop who treats them badly and they think all cops are bad because their interaction with the one cop didn't go well.
Right.
It's not fair to other cops, And similarly and conversely, conversely is a ding word. The reality is that your experience with the people who serve in your family is not the same as, and look, they're serving likely under essentially responsible leadership. There'll be new leadership in charge, and so it'll be different. Look at Phineas, I think, writes something really good here. Look at how Trump effed up the USPS. I mean, exactly.
That's true.
It demands a real attention to who's in power, Karen says, Mark, you're right on in every respect. It needs to be said and repeated over and over. Well, thank you. We need more Karen.
Listen,
we need more Karen around here.
If you need to give me or anyone else a cold slap in the face, and that helps us not have another Trump, I'm all for it. You can cold slap me as many times as it takes in order for our democracy
Well,
to stand because I
don't want-
believe
yeah.
he's a threat. I believe he's a horrible threat, and I will take the cold slap in order to have him not be in power ever.
Yeah, well, it's the argument I want to give a cold slap. I never want to give you, even metaphorically. I don't want to give you. I
I'll take
adore
the
you,
cold-
but
cold
sometimes
slap me. Cold it.
sometimes you have to yell
Bring
in the
it
living
on.
room. Wait a minute, you people aren't paying attention. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.